we've got the title of the psychology of the thriller. So I thought, let's talk psychology, because you know how much I love doing that. And now I get to ask you really awkward questions and make everybody squirm. It seems like after this year, psychology for me has become a lot more important, because it feels like a lot of what used to go on beneath the surface, people are now talking about. I think perhaps because we're all kind of struggling with the same things. So what I'd like to do is talk about the psychology of the thriller, and what that means for us and what it means out in the world. Yeah. So the first question I have for you is, how are you doing?
You want to go first, or?
Yeah, you go first, Alex.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I guess the first thing is we were really lucky because I didn't have a job that meant I had to be out and about in the world during the initial lockdown. So, you know, people that work in the NHS or people in supermarkets and driving buses, that would sort of be really tough because we were pretty much able just to lock down right away and not go out for months, which I actually found probably easier than a lot of people I've spoken to. And I guess that's just partly my natural antisocialness. But it really sort of, it was actually okay for me. And I think because I was still able to do things like exercise and go out and go for runs and things didn't change too much because I was still sort of, you know, at home, sort of working on a book, and, you know, with the family around. And I actually felt really lucky that I wasn't affected too badly. Having said that, it will be really nice to get out and actually do some real life events in the future, hopefully not too distant future.
Yeah, it was a similar situation for us because, and in fact, I had even luckier because my partner is a primary school teacher, so he was dealing with the home learning of our daughter as well. And I think what I realised actually is I'm quite a homebody, so you know, like Alex, locking down with my family wasn't tough. I mean, you know, we live in London, we're surrounded by parks, we could still go out and about, and because in our neighborhood, you know, you'd always sort of bump into someone you knew on a walk, so it didn't feel like you were completely cut off in a way I imagine it has been for some people. But I think as a family now, we're starting to see the repercussions, like our daughter finished primary school in the first lockdown and started secondary school in September, and for, you know, her and her classmates, it's been really tough. So I think that at the moment I feel quite zen about it all. But I mean, we did sadly lose people we knew, like some family friends in January, but I'm more now concerned about how we come out of this. And it's going back to what you said, Emma, it's we're now talking about mental health and psychology and how we're all feeling more. And I think my feeling is it's what's coming over the horizon with all that's for me, that's how where COVID feels at the moment.
I think what's been really interesting for me, I've done a couple of sessions talking to people about psychology, and you know, I say to them in advance, so like, let me know if you have any questions so I can make sure I answer them. And everybody has been asking the same thing, like, why is my brain broken? Why can't I think? Why do I feel so tired and so tearful? And what's so interesting, I'm going to use the word interesting because I feel like I shouldn't swear, but that's exactly how I have felt over the past couple of weeks. It's almost been like you cope. And I was like you guys, you know, I'm pretty introverted. I like my own space. I like being with the boys and my husband and at home. And so for the most part, we were really lucky. I mean, we moved in the middle of lockdown. But you know, it has meant we've got a bigger house and we've got space and I've got an office, which is all great. But I feel like I and a lot of people have hit this emotional exhaustion phase where we've just gone, okay, I can't cope anymore. You know, I'm going to start tantruming like a 3-year-old. You know, and I think, you know, what you said about moving forward, I think I think this is one of the reasons it's so important that we all have these conversations, you know, is that it's normalized, you know, that yes, there are going to be challenges, and that there are going to be days where we just burst into tears, but there are also going to be days when we feel really zen, exactly like you just said. It seems to me like being authors, our role almost went through this kind of paradigm shift whilst we were in the pandemic. What do you think that fiction has meant to people within this pandemic?
I mean, you know, just talking to all my friends who are reading so much more, it's provided escapism in a way, because, you know, with constant 24-hour news and Twitter, you know, social media, the constant screen scrolling, so actually picking up books, a physical book again, lots of my friends who haven't done that for ages, you know, just they read books on screens and stuff. So there's been a real shift amongst people I know that of wanting to switch off completely, and books allow you to do that, and they take you off into a world that isn't yours, and you know, that allows you to just not think about what we have been dealing with on a minute by minute, hour by hour, week by week basis for like 18 months now. So I mean, that was my take on it.
Yeah. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the sort of beneficiaries of this whole situation is authors and books and booksellers, I guess, because people have a bit more time on their hands, and, you know, part of that has been watching a lot more Netflix, if you're like me, but also reading a lot more books as well. And something I've been quite interested in is the number of people I've spoken to that have been getting into audiobooks more than previously. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because people have they got used to doing their sort of 1 hour daily exercise, so they listen to an audiobook when they went for a run, or just kind of, you know, pottering about the house doing housework. And I found that was kind of interesting. And I wonder if there's some sort of kind of human contact bonus to that, because you've got somebody reading you the story. So I just sort of listened to Barack Obama's autobiography, which is like 26 hours long or something crazy like that. But it is quite nice going out for a walk and having Barack chat to you while you're doing it. So yeah, I wonder if that's a thing that's bigger.
My other half could beat that. He listened to audio, the latest Stephen King, and it was 48 hours. But he went out for every hour. Yeah. And actually, thinking about it, I wonder if it was for adults, providing that same kind of pleasure that children get when their parents read to them in the evening. You know, our daughter's 11 and she still we're rereading Harry Potter again at the moment, because she still likes that half an hour before bedtime of just one of us sitting down with her and reading to her. And I wonder actually if the explosion in audio popularity during the lockdowns is a similar thing. It's a comfort thing, hearing someone talk, read you a story.
That's a really good point. And I never thought of that, but it's almost like when you have that voice in your head, it's like the voice we provide for our children, like we're being parented. And we've had to be such grown-ups. Excuse me, my dog is now in the room and trying to join in, so we'll ignore him. We've had to be such grown-ups throughout this thing. I can understand that a lot of people are going, just talk to me nice.
Yeah.
And just read me a story.
Just read me a story. So one of the big issues that I have noticed for myself and for a lot of people I have talked to is what is known as uncertainty intolerance within psychology. And I think that the pandemic has really driven that home. You know, we go through life and we almost con ourselves into thinking that we can predict what will happen tomorrow. And of course, when you're in a pandemic, it suddenly becomes really obvious that everything is up for grabs and that we just can't tell what's coming next. And that uncertainty intolerance, I think, has created an awful lot of stress for people. But what I find interesting about that is that when we write something like a crime book, we have to have uncertainty in it. So in that context, people actually seek that out. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on what it is about that. Why do we approach it in two such different ways?
Ooh, that's,
I think it can be comforting to watch somebody else have the rug pulled out from under them and sort of feel like, to be able to sort of experience that thrill without it being you that's the person that's in the sort of dangerous situation.
Is that comforting or sadistic?
I think it's a bit of
it can be both.
I think it's a bit of both. I think you trust authors, you know, with their protagonists, that they're going to put them through, they're going to make them put them, you know, jump them through hoops, over hurdles, but ultimately they'll be okay. And I think there is that kind of sort of masochistic satisfaction of sort of watching them suffer, but kind of knowing that they'll probably be okay at the end. So yeah, I can definitely see parallels. And yet it's really interesting because during the pandemic, you know, during COVID, when we have had all this uncertainty, you know, lots of people at the beginning were saying, oh, you know, readers, they're not going to want psychological thrillers, they're going to want uplift, they're going to want something completely different. And yet crime sales were really strong. So it's really interesting that maybe because there was so much uncertainty in real world, you know, reading thrillers where you sort of know that uncertainty has an end point, maybe that was kind of a nice escapism for readers.
Yeah, there's some sort of order there, and you know there's going to be a resolution, and things are, you know, if not going to be okay, then you're going to get an ending. So yeah,
so it's more like managed uncertainty in the world of books.
Sorry, just, you know, because in like lots of us, as Alex and I were saying, you know, our pandemic wasn't, you know, it's been manageable, it's been really tough at times, but we've been quite lucky. And I suppose for some people, you know, reading crime novels, actually, you know, they are worst case scenarios in a lot of cases, and maybe that was just another way of sort of switching off and thinking, well, I'll read this and I'll scare myself with this because, you know, I don't know what's going on with the rest with the real world.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, in the early days of the pandemic, the #1 movie on Netflix was that I can't remember the name of it now.
Contagion.
Yeah, which I mean, clearly people just watching that thinking, well, it could be worse.
What was the #1 movie?
It's called Contagion. It's Matt Damon. And I watched it very early on, and my partner Rory, he was just like, "Why are you watching this? This is about what we're going through." And I said, because I kind of need to know that they found the vaccine, and they did. They found the vaccine. And
yes, the comfort from fiction. That's really interesting, because I know there was a series came on Netflix about the COVID. Did anyone watch that one about the COVID situation? Like, it had gone on for like a decade, and the world had like collapsed. And I just see that. I think that's what everyone's done. Everybody's looked at it and gone, no.
Was it a drama?
Yeah.
Now saying, right, we're still going to be here. Yeah, there's no way I'd watch that.
No, I mean, why would one?
But Contagion was very entertaining. If nothing else, Gwyneth Paltrow's death scene, which was quite.
Yeah, that was great. What was the autopsy? Scene. Yeah.
Sorry.
Fun for all family.
If you'll excuse me, I'm just going to kick my dog out.
Is that Dobby?
That is Dobby. Would you like to see him?
Yes. Oh, hello.
Oh, so we should have just a pet section and bring on our pets at the halftime show.
Come on, let's go.
My cat's just gone wandering past, so meowing. She said,
I'm not sure where my cat is. I've closed all the windows because she started exploring out on the roof. So,
well, when my kids were home, my 6-year-old managed to appear naked in every Zoom call I did, so it could have been a lot worse. Okay, so on to carrying on with this sort of topic of psychology and crime writing. I've been thinking a lot about my role as an author, what it means, you know, in the sort of context of what we've gone through, you know, because you have, you know, there are doctors and teachers and people who work in Tesco's and bus drivers, you know, who do critical tasks, and you kind of, it has led me to think, what am I doing? You know, what is my role in it? I was wondering how you'd feel about talking about that for a bit, you know, in terms of how much has writing fiction changed you as an individual? I mean, what has that done for who you are and who you kind of perceive yourself to be?
It's a slightly difficult one for me to answer, because I have been writing professionally since I was 18. I started as a reporter on my local newspaper. So writing fiction is was a more obvious progression for me in the job that I've always been doing since I left school. So, but there was one little incident in the lockdown which really made me think about the worth of authors, and just, because like you were saying, we were clapping the NHS on the doorsteps, we were hearing, especially in London, an awful lot of people who worked for Transport for London lost their lives. And, I did have times when I just thought I couldn't write, because I just felt that, I wasn't contributing. And as I say, my other half's a teacher, and in the very first lockdown, before they really got involved with, they sorted out home learning, he sat down every day at 11 o'clock and read a story to his class. He teaches year 5, so they're sort of like 8 to 9 year olds. And I used to sit up the top of the stairs and just listen to him reading these stories, children, and the kids were enthralled. And he works in a part of London which, there's quite a high level of deprivation, and some of these children don't have like books at home, and just hearing him make our story, people's stories come alive. And I just thought, well, that's what authors are doing in this pandemic. They're helping children, they're entertaining adults. And so, it made me feel a little bit, obviously not saving lives, but actually I'm maybe calming lives, or, so I think, but in terms of, there hasn't been a huge amount of change for me switching to being an author. So
do you think that there is a difference between the journalistic writing you were doing originally and moving into fiction? I mean, how do you sort of see that shift, or is it all just part of the same thing?
I used to write for celebrity magazines, so I'm going to say no, there's not between that and fiction. Because it's actually, all my previous editors will hate me for saying this, but when
none of them are here, it's fine.
When you're writing about a Hollywood star, if you don't know them, it's a character. Jennifer Aniston is a character in a soap opera that magazines like that create. And so actually there's not a huge jump between that and fiction.
I like that. What about you, Alex?
So in general, I think writing fiction, I think probably can't help but make you more empathic or empathetic. I think that's probably the word. And just because of that process of having to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who isn't like you, whether it's the protagonist or the villain, and just sort of think a story through from all these different perspectives. So I find it probably has made me more able to see other people's points of view about things. I'm less likely to get sort of sucked in and think I'm always right about things, because so much of my day is spent just pretending to be other people and thinking about things from other people's point of view. So I don't know if that sort of helped any during the pandemic. It was probably the toughest experience I've had writing a book, because particularly at one point, I just got to a point where I just binned the last 20,000 words that I'd written because they were just garbage, and just really kind of changed the way the story worked. And I don't know if that was just because it was a tough book, or it was because it was such a weird situation to be writing in. But funnily enough, the story I ended up discovering that the story worked by making it smaller and bringing it down to just one person in a house, which I'm sure there had to be some sort of psychological reason for that.
That feels really Freudian in the middle of a lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you say that, because there is some really interesting psychological research that shows that both writers and readers show higher levels of empathy. And also that fiction writers specifically, are more likely to discuss emotion in conversation. They're more likely to use emotional words than is somebody else from the general population. So it's almost like we kind of like dip into this pool of emotion and experience, and kind of bring everybody else along with us. I know that I recently, you know, when I've been feeling exhausted and burnt out, I've discovered these Jodie Taylor books, the St. Mary's series, which have been such a rescue, you know, because they're like time travel fantasy and they're just so fun. And I think it's really clear, you know, how valuable that. Oh my, I got two Alexes. That was really exciting.
I'm back.
Hey.
Don't know what happened there.
I didn't know if you were just doing like a, you know, like a statue pose, or if you'd actually frozen. So.
No, it disappeared. It shut down. It was yeah, weird.
Oh, back, you're fine. Yeah, so I think that it's really interesting, you know, like you said, just what stories offer us. Another pet. Okay, we have to see her.
This is Lolly.
Oh, I think as you said, Michelle, you know, at a time when we are at our most stressed, the value of story is, it can actually be life-saving at times. You know, I know I'm going through a phase where I just feel so tired, and having that, I finished for the day, I can pick up this book and step into this other world, is everything. It's so valuable to me. What about there's a theory in psychology called the terror management theory, and it suggests that we, exactly like we said earlier.
So I mean, Bob.
She's like, look at me, I'm beautiful. The terror management theory suggests that we use fiction to scare ourselves just enough that we can kind of be exposed to it, but not overwhelmed by it. I mean, what is your experience of that? Is terror necessary in something like a crime book?
Well, I think in psychological thrillers, definitely, you know, you need to create that fear, that suspense. That, you know, you're taking the reader on a journey, and you want them to immerse themselves in it to the point where they think it's happening to them. They are in that book with your characters. So yeah, I mean, I've just read Claire Mackintosh's Hostage, which is set on a plane. It's set on the inaugural London to Sydney flight, and it was terrifying. I was on that plane. I was trying to help fly that plane. You know, it was so good. And there were times where I was holding my breath reading it. And for me, that is the sign of an absolutely brilliant thriller, that I forget where I am. I forget what room I am. And I was in that cockpit with her characters. So
yeah.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I mean, that's why people like horror movies and disaster movies, because you want to sort of experience the kind of thrill of something terrible like that happening, but to know that things are going to be, that order is going to be restored at the end of it. And I guess at the bottom, you know, you walk out of it or you close the book and think, well, at least that's not me, so things could be worse.
I like that. What about, I mean, we talk about dark stuff, you know, as crime writers, you know, it is all about really dark stuff. What is it about that draws us to the book, especially in a time when we are so stressed all the time anyway? You know, what is it that makes us seek out these kind of really dark narratives? Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think I think about this a lot, and I think maybe it's just the fact that crime fiction is just the sort of perfect vehicle for a mystery. And I think I also have this sort of pat line that, you know, all stories are crime fiction, really, because yeah, there's always some sort of, for a story to grab me, there has to be an element of mystery or some sort of transgression that takes place, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a crime in a court of law, but it could be somebody having an affair or somebody keeping a secret from their loved ones. And I think just crime lends itself to you've got that without having to think about it. That's just an inherent part of the story. So I think that sort of helps to draw people in, because they've got an unanswered question that they need to know the answer to, and they've got an element of, I guess, disruption to the status quo.
That's really interesting. So you just said that there has to be an element of transgression, and I'd never thought about that before. Why is that, do you think?
I don't know. I just think that is what makes a story work, because you start off a story with, I mean, there's the I can't remember who said it, was some movie producer said, you know, the way you put together a story is you get your hero, you send him up a tree, you throw rocks at him, and then you bring him down. So that's, you know, any good story has to have a kind of element of that, where you've got somebody who starts off and something happens that changes their life, and potentially a negative way, and you've got to get them out of that. So whether it's crime or anything else, I think you've got to have some sort of change to the status quo, some sort of transgression that leads them into the story and gives them, you know, something to solve, something to get out of.
So what you're saying is we're all just a bunch of torture masters.
Yeah.
Just torture fictitious people.
Yeah, and I think probably soap opera writers are the worst out of anyone. They're way worse than we are.
That's true. But I was going to say the same as Alex, that for me, it's about the mystery rather than the really dark elements, because it's about creating a story, the whodunit, you know, so that when my readers read them, they're trying to work it out from all the clues. It's just because Shadow of a Doubt is actually my first psychological thriller before I've written a detective series featuring a family liaison officer. And my agent, you know, I'd written the 4th book in the series, and my agent said, well, what do you want to write next? And I said, well, I've got this idea for this for Shadow of a Doubt, but I don't know if I can write it, because I didn't think that I didn't think that, you know, that I could write dark enough, because, you know, because police procedural is a very different thing. It's about a mystery and clues and things, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get enough into the head, like into because, you know, with the psychological thriller, lots of them are written in first person, so you really get into that person's head. I wasn't sure I could do it. My agent said, give it a go, see how you get on, and luckily, you know, I'm you know, managed to write a book that readers are enjoying. But I still don't think I'm as dark as lots of other authors out there. I read some books and I think, what? My brain, I just don't know if I'm probably more, you know, psychological light.
So what is that then, that you could kind of inhabit this really dark? Because I don't think of you as a dark person at all. So that you can, you know, you've sort of discovered that you can inhabit quite a dark kind of space. I mean, how does that feel?
It's a bit strange, you know, when sort of my parents read Shadow of a Doubt, they're like, whoa, you know, they know me better than anyone, and you know, that was because it's about a 9-year-old child, but it starts who thinks her house is being haunted because she keeps hearing all these noises, and it, you know, it was partly drawn from, I had such a furtive imagination when I was little, so I was able to, I think I was able to channel a lot of myself into it in a way. But yeah, it's I don't see, it's a difficult one, because I don't see myself as someone who really easily conjures up murderous thoughts. It's just, but so to be able to learn to write that, I had to do a lot of research, to be fair, and reading up about you know, at one point years ago, the 9-year-old has to have psychiatric treatment, and so I read up a lot about what a child would go through at that time and stuff. So it wasn't something that just flowed out of me. It you know, I had to research it.
Did you find, how did that work when you were in that kind? Because I mean, that is a dark topic, 9-year-olds having psychiatric treatment. I can't speak. So how did that feel, running alongside the pandemic and all of this like real world horrible stuff?
Well, Shadow, I had actually finished before the pandemic, and I'm quite, you know, I think it's probably a good job that I had it had, you know, I finished it probably in the November before, you know, as COVID was coming over the hill, as it were. So because I don't know if I'd have been able to write that book especially watching what my daughter was going through with anxiety of, you know, being apart from her classmates, and I think it would have been a very different book if I had to have written it in. And so the book I've written, I did write in during lockdown is The Death of Me, which comes out in November, and that's about a rock star. It's kind of sort of set in that a bit more in that celebrity world. So that it was a very different prospect. I don't think I could have written Shadow during the lockdown.
Do you think, Alex, I'll start you off with this one. Do you think that our experiences over the past year have changed what you will write and what you want to write at this point?
I think it's the sort of the ideas I'm throwing around at the moment tend to be much more sort of wide open spaces. I think it's made me want to write about, not being stuck in a house, being able to sort of roam about and go to different countries and different places and new places and meet new people. So I don't know if that's just a sort of reaction against the last sort of 18 months we've had, or if it's just, I mean, I quite like that sort of book anyway, that sort of globetrotting element. But I think, I guess we'll see with the next books that come out after the pandemic. It'll be really interesting to almost carbon date books that come out in an author's career, look at, what one came out in 2021 and what one came out in 2022 and what sort of emotional journey have they gone through. I think that'll be really interesting to look back in 10 years and go, wow, that was all about the pandemic.
Yeah, the ones where the character just sits in a room and cries for 9 months.
Yeah. Like the one that's coming out in September, basically Alexa is a key character at the end of the book because she just became a member of the family, I suppose.
I've fallen out with my Alexa. She refuses to listen to me.
I really hate Alexa. But my next one's about a serial killer, so read into that what you will. It's about whether you can live with a serial killer and not know.
Wow.
So don't want to cast any aspersions on my other half during he was
this is what happens when you spend too much time with your partner.
but I do think it will change I'd be really interesting. I think Alex is right, what the books that people come out with in the next year. I think it's going to be really interesting. And like you said, you binged 20,000 words, which is a huge, take it from us, that is a huge amount of work to just decide that you're going to bin. And I wonder how many authors have actually started a book last year and then just ditched it because because what they were going through just took their brains and took their idea in a completely different direction. So it'd be interesting if books get much darker because of it.
And just think about that. I think part of that was we probably don't appreciate how much of the process is helped by being out in the world, even in coffee shops and sort of talking to people and just doing normal things. And we were sort of just stuck in an echo chamber for 6 months at that point when I did that. So I think I probably hadn't appreciated how much I need sort of the rest of the world to feed into the process of writing a book.
And did you find that as well, Emma? Because if sometimes you just be in a bus stop or you'll just be in a queue and you overhear a snatch of conversation, or you see someone, you think, oh, that's exactly how I saw that character in my head. And because we haven't been doing it, because it's very much like tunnel vision, get into the supermarket, mask on, run round, come out. You're absolutely right, Alex. There just hasn't been those triggers that we're used to.
I mean, I don't know how you guys found it, but for the first 8 months, I couldn't write. I couldn't tell stories. I mean, I had long COVID as well. So part of it was that brain fog. Like I just couldn't, I'd start a sentence and I'd go, I don't know what that was. I just couldn't produce. All I could do was research. So research was fine. I could read other people's work. I could understand it, but I couldn't do that creativity thing for the better part of last year. It absolutely floored me. And I think part of it was the illness.
Yeah.
I think another part of it was we were then in a 3-bedroom semi with no personal space whatsoever. So I was sitting on one chair with my laptop. My husband was sitting on the other chair with his laptop. And I've got 2 kids with iPads right next to me. And I couldn't tell stories in that environment.
Yeah.
I have found like the space I've achieved from moving house has made a massive difference. And also my health has improved, so that has helped. But I mean, what about you? Could you do that sort of basic creating when we were in that position?
Well, I mean, I had a deadline, and so our lovely editor Francesca at Orion, I had a book to deliver, which I was meant to deliver in September last year. So I had started writing it anyway. And as I say, the first lockdown was very easy because schools were still kind of getting to grips with how they were doing home learning. My daughter was still at primary school then, so it was less relentless. So we had a great little system where I would do one lesson and my partner would do the other lesson, and I'd go and write. So we were quite disciplined. So I managed to get that book done, and then I just went. And the one that I'm starting now, it's taken me so long to get going, because when the third deadline hit in January, my daughter was then at secondary and she was online 5 hours a day. My partner was teaching in another room, and it was so loud, it was so noisy, because I could just hear him teaching 80 children online, and she was on a class of 30, and I was just like, and that made me realize that and I think perhaps another reason authors have, or the three of us at least, have found it okay, is because we're used to working at home. But I realized, oh God, I miss the peace and quiet. I love at home, but oh my God. So, and now, ironically, they're both back at school, and I really miss them. I rattle around the house now because I have to have radio on, which I never had before. I have to have background talking to write. But yeah, the one that I'm starting, the serial killer one, I'm only now just starting to find my stride with it. It's been really, really hard. So
what about you? Sorry, what
no,
about you?
So, just zapped of any
creative
energy.
That is exactly the word for it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Alex? Yeah, I mean, I think I was lucky in the early going because we had sort of a decent amount of space, so I was able to sort of retreat and and do some work, or even work out in the garden on a laptop. But yeah, it was much tougher once the homeschooling properly kicked in. And we've got 3 kids, so it's not even just like we had to make sure one kid sort of did all the stuff.
You're outnumbered. Oh no.
We're like, oh my God, there's like 3 sets of work we have to coordinate. And yeah, we did what we could, but I'm not convinced either of us would make a teacher. So that really sucked things out, because there was just constant things that you had to go and find, or you had to sort of go out for a trip into the woods to take photos of 9 different types of leaf or stuff like that. And any time I actually got sort of half an hour to try and write, it was really difficult just to sort of get myself back into that zone. So it was easier on the early going before the sort of homeschooling thing really kicked in properly. So I'm quite glad that they're back now. Although up in Scotland we've finished off for the summer, so they're back in the house again.
Look, we've got ours coming home in like 2 weeks, and I'm going, no.
It's actually not as bad because you don't have to do anything. So you don't have to do homeschooling. So you can just do sort of fun family stuff.
What I found when I was attempting, and Michelle, and we've talked about this, our homeschooling was a disaster, because I was trying to work and be ill. One of those I was much more successful at than the other. My husband was working. There was so many decisions to make and so many things to think about. Like, you have to be here at that point. You have to do this. We thank God for BBC Bite Size.
Yeah.
But I found I was exhausted before I got to my computer, just because of all of the, oh my God, how much do kids eat? How many times a day would they say, what can I eat? I'm like, oh my God, you're literally eating as you're asking me this.
I think my low point was, it was about 10 minutes before my daughter due to start a chemistry lesson. She said, I need a pair of American tan tights. We're making poo.
You're making what now?
Poo.
Oh, excellent.
This whole digestive where you had to mush up food. And I'm standing in the kitchen, like squeezing these tights to make poo. And I was just like, oh my God, But do you know what? We are very, very lucky as authors, and which you can't answer, because we do have the sort of job where we can stop for 2 hours and come back to it, or we can work in the evenings, And the people, I've got lots of friends who had to be online, and I just don't know how to do it. So if anyone's watching this and they homeschooled with full-time jobs where they had to be online all the time, I just, well done, because I don't know how you did it. Because as
I don't know how that's possible.
do that hours, yeah.
It's absolutely
Basically
unbelievable.
not possible.
Yeah.
Say again, sorry, Alex.
No, it's basically not possible. Yeah.
It's not, is it? It's absolutely.
Particularly if you've got multiple kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be lots of crime novels where, our children, we're going to just get like these awful children characters? We should just criminalize our kids.
I keep telling my children I'm signing them up for chimney sweep school over the summer because they miss out on too much. Need to learn a new hobby. Okay, so we are about to run out of time. We've only got a few minutes left. So what I would like you to do is, if you could both say a little bit about your most recent books, just to leave our listeners with somewhere they can go look. If I start off, my most recent book is called How to Be Broken, and it's my first non-fiction, and it's all about the psychology of being broken and how to fall apart. It's something I have learned a lot about over the last year. Michelle, would you like to go next?
Okay, so my most recent is Shadow of a Doubt, and it's about a young woman who returns to the family home where she believed there was a paranormal incident years ago that she was blamed for, and it was actually inspired by a radio show I listened to about the Enfield haunting, which is Britain's most famous paranormal event.
Oh, interesting. I'm scared even hearing that. So good for terror management.
So my new one, which is coming out very soon, is called Darkness Falls, and it just starts off, I just got the idea for the first chapter and worked out from there. So it starts off with a coincidence, a sort of an accidental happening where it's a woman that's driving home from a funeral, and she lives in New York, and she's driving back from Philadelphia, and she's sort of driving through the rain and fighting tiredness. So she decides to pull off the motorway and go into an all-night diner where she sits down and just closes her eyes for a second just to have a break. And then she hears a familiar voice from the person in the booth behind her. And it turns out that voice is the voice of the man who killed her brother 20 years ago and then disappeared. So she has to work out what to do from that position.
Great. That sounds a great opening.
It does. It does. And are you working on anything new, both of you? What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on this psychological thriller about a serial killer, but my next one's out in November, and that's called The Death of Me, and it's about the disappearance of a world famous rock star.
Wow, very interesting.
Cool.
Alex, your turn.
I'm just sort of kicking around a few different ideas. So I think actually just with the last year, I just have needed a bit of headspace just to sort of chuck some stuff around and try and come up with something. So I don't have anything firm right now, but I think it's been quite good just to sort of have a fallow period and have a think about what's next.
Yeah, I think we all need a bit of a breather at this point. I have decided to mix it up by writing 3 books at once, so that makes life much less stressful.
That sounds easy. Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah. It's great. No problem at all. Why not? But no, because I'm working on my How to Love a Psychopath nonfiction, it means I'm interviewing loads of people. So I actually talk to people as a part of my work day, which is very unusual for me. So it's nice.
Did you say How to Love a Psychopath?
How to Love a Psychopath.
That sounds brilliant.
So it's a non-fiction, and it's about what happens when we are in relationships with those with psychopathic traits. So we have parents, partners, friends, colleagues, and it's fascinating. So I'm talking to some really interesting people, and I'm tired now.
Yeah.
So I think we are just about out of time. And I'd just like to say thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed our chat.
Thank you.
Thanks to you for the great questions.
Oh, you're more than welcome. But next time, Alex, I'm going to need you to get a pet
Yeah, I'll bring Mochi up next time.
Would you? Would
recommend
you?
it, yeah.
If you could. Ours have crashed it, so I think we need that.